Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. Today is Monday, someday in November. That is the 10th of November, 2025. I have a video that's going up today, some point, and then so my video, my wife got an email from. So let me finish what I was saying. Stop interrupting me. It's snowing like crazy here. Went from where I was wearing shorts, it was like 60 degrees last week in the 60s and nice, to where it was like kind of cold and windy. And then next thing you know, we have a couple inches of snow. So it basically went from summer to winter. Anyhow, video's going up today, and then this one will probably be up tomorrow night, and then I'll skip Wednesday, and then we'll see what's up. So the video, my wife got a personal email from Erika Kirk. I looked down and I was like, oh, there's 9,000 views already, and I just put it up. So, that's like a viral video for me. I used to get videos that had like 1 million views in one day. Of course, the videos were shitty. They weren't as good as they are now, in terms of just they were on goofy shit, Illuminati stuff and whatever. My videos are better now, is what I'm saying, but I don't get as many views. But anyways, I got so many freaking comments, and the majority of comments were about how Erika Kirk sucks. I'll cover that a little bit. A lot of Christians are not liking her because there are a lot of people calling her Jezebel. And who's that other hoe from the Bible? Delilah. Is Delilah in the Bible, or is that something else? Well, whatever. Samson, Delilah, that's not the Bible. Is that something? I don't know. Whatever that is. Delilah, and there are a couple of hoes, and they were Christian people that are up in arms about how bad Monica sucks. Erika sucks. Oh, when I call her Monica for new people, it's just, for whatever reason, that's how I think about her. I'm not Monica Lewinsky, just Monica. I don't know. That's probably a real name, and I've just psychically picked up on it. And so I got a bunch of comments to get to. I want to cover the Old Testament, which I covered in my last video. These really weird ones from in a different angle that's going to be funny. And, I think it's going to be funny. We haven't done it yet. Be funny to me. So anyways, let's start here, because I have something I wanted to say about Republicans and Trumpers.
Ghislaine Maxwell, in her own words, describing life in her...
It's clearly spelled Ghislaine, which, all roads don't go down Ghislaine, man. Don't go down Ghislaine. It's spelled Ghislaine. It's not Ghislaine. How the fuck is that Ghislaine, right? There's no A in there, right? There's no, Ghislaine, right? G-A. It's spelled, how is G, J, his, Jizz?
new prison home. I feel like I have dropped through Alice in Wonderland's looking glass, she writes, a federal prison Camp Bryan, according to emails she sent to friends and family, reviewed by NBC News. I am much, much happier here, she writes. Maxwell is serving a 20-year sentence for recruiting minors to be sexually abused.
Okay, so, how could you still be a fucking Trumper? And if any guys are Trumpers, how can you, look in the mirror and be a fucking Trumper, right? Because there's nobody worse than Ghislaine Maxwell. A lot of these girls who were abused say she was worse. That she groomed them in a way, and many of the times she sexually assaulted them herself. And did things to them, and would encourage it. And then she also threatened their lives, and she was like a total gatekeeper, and kind of worse than Jeffrey Epstein, according to these girls. Of course she was. And she was betraying these girls and grooming them for something. Just a fucking horrible person. And Trump seems to love her. Not seems to. He said he wished her well. And then when she didn't rat him out, his personal lawyer went to see her. His personal fucking lawyer was representing him in case after case. Not these bogus cases that he says. Trump's always flirted with breaking the law. He's always been on the, in a gray area with the law. Trying to exploit it, trying to manipulate it. Sometimes out now just breaking it. He's always been that guy. He's always been somebody going bankrupt, just fucking, just a piece of shit, right? Somebody with no moral compass, right? And so Trump has all this evidence. They were about to close in on him for that picture that he drew, Jeffrey Epstein, of a woman, and he wrote his name as her pubic hair, which is weird as fuck. And that was clearly a picture he drew. And then Charlie Kirk died. So he was about to get fucked by his relationship with Epstein. And, I mean, he put Ghislaine Maxwell in a minute. He gave her a lesser sentence, right? He took her from a max after a conversation with his personal lawyer. And so, he's hiding all the Epstein stuff. And he's got all of his cronies who were all about releasing the Epstein list have now reversed their course. He's clearly guilty. He said Jeffrey Epstein's a terrific guy, and he likes beautiful women almost as much as I do, and he likes them on the young side, which meant he knew everything about it. He's complicit. He was a part of it. He was pals with this fuck. He's not the guy you thought he was. And he's doing all this other shit, martial law, across the board, all of it. Like, how can you look in the fucking mirror with some self-respect and realize you haven't been fucked by this guy, right? And, the Democrats are bad. And the Republicans are bad. But they're like a married couple. It's like when you have a married couple friends that are getting divorced. And you pick one side, right? And you're on one side. That person just whining all the time. And then you realize they deserve everything they get, right? They're both fucking complicit. Like not one. They're in a shitty, abusive, twisted relationship, and they both suck. And that's what the Democratic and Republican parties are like. You think one side's better than the other, and then you realize they both suck, and they both fuck you over, and they're just horrible people. And horrible, in terms of a metaphor with a married couple. And so you realize you got to cut ties with both of them. Like they're both, so it's a weird fucking binary dynamic that they're caught in. They suck everybody in with them. And it's, there's nothing there, right? There's no, they just both make things worse. And that's the Republican and Democratic Party. And so as soon as Trump gives her a fucking cushy deal, then you should know, like there's so many red flags with this guy. He was a father of the vax. He just, cut a deal with Ozempic. I mean, it's all this shit he's doing, right? He's doing all the bad shit he said he wasn't going to do, and he's not doing any of the things he promised. And he's, the tariffs and all that bullshit. That's bad for the economy and raising prices. He's just a fucking disaster. Like, after all the evidence, like, how can you look yourself in the mirror and say, this guy's great, and, he totally is fucking not lying to me, right?
Used by Jeffrey Epstein. The emails obtained by the House Judiciary Committee investigating allegations of special treatment written by Maxwell after an abrupt and unusual transfer from a low-security facility in Florida to this all-women's camp in Texas, typically reserved for white-collar criminals.
It's called Camp Ryan. She's in Camp Ryan.
The move came amid backlash over the DOJ and FBI announcement in July that a review found no incriminating client list. Soon after, Maxwell met with Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche.
Did you know of the existence of any such list?
There is no list.
Oh, good. Like, fucking, she's totally believable. Like, fucking, she's a pedo, right? She's a pedophile. And that's Trump's personal lawyer that was in there to make sure she didn't rat him out. And she knew it. She's not fucking stupid. She knew what to say. She knows how to play the fucking game. Don't incriminate Trump and you're going to get a fucking cushy deal. Right? She knew she had leverage. Of course, they'd kill her.
Days later, she was transferred and writing emails gushing over her improvement.
Epstein was killed when Trump was president. Like, he didn't, So it's all this stuff. I mean, Trump, and Charlie Kirk. The first person I said when Charlie Kirk died, I didn't even know who Kirk was. And I'm like, the one guy who seems to be benefiting the most right now is Trump. Second was the country of Israel. And then the third was his wife, Erika, who seems to be living her best life in the spotlight, milking every second. Someone who wants to be in front of people, somebody who didn't really love playing the secondary role as a housewife. She wanted to be out there and, be seen by people. And so you always look at the people who benefit. Like I say about the Hamas holes, right? Hamas has been receiving money and been propped up by Israel for years. They're an asset. It's well known. It's admitted to. And Netanyahu himself said, to a bunch of private people that leaked, his people, his his party, that as long as Hamas was in power, there could be no two-state solution. And so they were propping him up, and they were making sure they got money, either through these Zionist donors, or they were encouraging Qatar to give them money, right? Because they wanted Hamas to do shit like they did. And everything that Hamas did made Israel's dreams come true. And so when you look at who benefits, then you know who the culprit is, right? Who benefits from Charlie Kirk's death? Who benefits from putting Ghislaine Maxwell in a minimum security prison? Who put her in a minimum security prison? Like, we know that. We don't have to... I mean, the other part is like you're looking for... Like, who killed Charlie Kirk? You don't know. But we know who put Ghislaine Maxwell in a minimum security prison. It's Trump. Why would he do that? Why would he send his former personal attorney, who's now the attorney general, in to talk to her, right? Because he's a piece of shit. And he's completely involved. At the very least, he knew everything was happening with Jeffrey Epstein and did nothing about it. Encouraged it, because these motherfuckers they have deviant lives. You know, Trump used to walk in the dressing room of Miss USA and Miss Teen USA and grope the girls and shit while they were dressing and half naked. I mean, he admitted to it on Howard Stern. I mean, the guy's a total piece of shit.
Conditions. The food is legions better. The place is clean. The staff responsive and polite, she wrote.
The staff. She's calling them the fucking staff. Right? That's what in England they call, like, if you're a royal, if you're like an earl or duke or some shit like that, you know, it's the staff, right? It's not the fucking prison guards. They're there to beat the shit out of you and fucking demean you and shit. It's the staff.
Saying in another, you were not allowed to steal, beat people up, and attack them with homemade weapons.
That's, it sounds like a paradise.
The Justice Department, which oversees federal prisons, declined to comment. Maxwell's attorney saying in a statement, it's time to get over the fact that she's in a safer facility. We should want that for everyone. The family of abuse survivor Virginia Roberts Giuffre, who later died by suicide, saying, we strongly reject the notion that a convicted child sex trafficker should reside in a residential neighborhood shielded by fences instead of bars. Priscilla
Boom. Nice fences, too. Camp Ryan. All right, so that's that. And they're trying to investigate this thing, whatever the Dems are pushing for it. But no, nothing's going to happen. The Dems weren't big on releasing the Jeffrey Epstein stuff until they realized Trump was totally against it. So I got a bunch of short videos in no particular order. They're going to get into some other stuff. So my video got 16,000 views in 24 hours, which is like a big thing for me. And so many like new Christian type people who, are unfamiliar with my stuff here. And people are talking about me swearing. I'll wait to cover this in the comment section because it's easier when I read the comments. But I was a little bit crunchy in my last video, so I had, just recovering from a migraine, still had like a little, I'm still, even today, I still have a little bit left. I mean, it comes and goes. But it wasn't as bad as it was 2 days ago. And whenever I have that, there's this period of time where I'm crunchy. And, I just, sometimes when you're looking into this depravity, like every day, usually because of the meditation I do and everything else, just detach myself from the, the ickiness, but it is just, people behaving badly. It's just bad. I also want to talk about dyslexia. Somebody asked me about it because their child has dyslexia, which I'll cover in a bit. But I'm going to wait to get to the voiceover to do that stuff.
That I what? What did you say?
You advised
I was
Jeffrey
his lawyer.
Epstein. I mean, you advised Jeffrey Epstein.
Independent country. That I what? What did you say?
You advised
I was
Jeffrey
his lawyer. I was his lawyer. I cannot avoid commenting about Max. I mean, basically, what he has said about Jews controlling this sounds like it could
I didn't
have been
say Jews.
Part of the protocols of the elders.
I didn't say Jews. What is Larry Ellison doing in the United States? He's buying Paramount to do propaganda films for Israel. His son is buying CBS, and they'll put Barry Weiss as editor-in-chief. This is the takeover that Netanyahu outlined in the meeting with Deborah Leah and these other influencers.
The most important purchase that is going on right now is glass TikTok #1.
Okay, well, it's just the music. You don't need the music. It's just off-putting. So there's that. That guy's such a piece of shit. That's Jeffrey Epstein's lawyer. I was his lawyer. Yeah, why would you be his lawyer when you're also a client, right? It's like the hair club for men. I'm not only a fucking president, but I'm also a client, right? He was also partaking with Jeffrey Epstein, that fucking guy, whatever his name is. I'll think of it later. That piece of shit lawyer. He's a guy who pressured whatever Norman Finkelstein. Norman Finkelstein was about to get tenure. He was a guy who wrote these. He was a Jewish guy who did deep research into the abuse in Gaza Strip for years when he was in the 80s. He was like an old hippie guy, and they blackballed him and barred him from. There's a good interview with him and Candace Owens, and again, Candace Owens is she's part of the show. Sure, she is, but some parts of the show are better than others, right? Like you guys recognize that some movies are better than others. Some, there's some things that are higher quality, and just more truthful. Like it's just like anything else. It's a spectrum. But Norman Finkelstein, they wouldn't let him get a job, and he was Jewish. Like he was blackballed by the the Zionists, and that lawyer, whatever his fucking name is, he's a guy who was lawyer for Al Gore during the Bush Gore dispute on the election and all those other things. And he was a president of Harvard. He went to DePaul University and made sure that Finkelstein wouldn't get tenure. Then he couldn't get a job at all anywhere. They blackballed him. And Candace Owens made the comment that he couldn't get a job at Harvard because he told the truth about Gaza. And Jeffrey Epstein, who had been a convicted pedophile, had a position at Harvard, right? So and that guy was, a head of, being the head of Harvard Law is some huge position. And that
Going on right now is class TikTok number one.
You have this dynamic where Miriam Adelson has contributed hundreds of millions of dollars to Donald Trump, paying for his campaign. This is an Israeli.
She's her husband is a big part of, like, he's dead now, but part of all this stuff. And Trump just completely went and bowed before her like she was his owner and master at the Knesset in Israel. It was like despicable. And the Trumpers are just so ignorant of all this stuff. It's it's hard to see how they could not be aware of this.
Assets. So it is an 8-front war, and Donald Trump is under, as Tucker Carlson sources said, Netanyahu's thumb. This is the worst foreign meddling that we have ever witnessed. This is the real foreign meddling scandal. It's Israelgate.
He talks about Ellison. Ellison
No,
is not Israeli.
you just insinuated.
He's a Jew.
No, I said Zionists.
He talks about
Israel firsters
Miriam
like
Adelson,
yourselves.
who's an American.
Look at this gross fuck, right? This gross fuck.
Yeah, I'm not
Israel
an Israel
firster.
firster. I'm an American firster.
He's American firster.
I'm an
You've
American
dedicated your
firster
career to
who
defending
strongly
Israel.
believes
When you're not
in
defending Jeffrey
democracy.
Epstein, you're
I've
defending
dedicated
Israel.
my
Oh shit. when you're not defending Jeffrey Epstein, you're defending Israel. This guy Dave Smith destroys Josh Hammer in a debate with Charlie Kirk overseeing it. I've listened to the whole thing. I'm going to play the whole thing and comment on all of it, and he just fucking rolls them. It's one of the worst fucking ass kickings in a debate that you'll ever see. And the same kind of stuff where they just lie. That's the problem. Like, the truth is, we don't get anything from our relationship with Israel. We get to have a military base, in a kind of, interesting place in the Middle East, and we get access to Jerusalem, which is, a holy city for these people. There's no real spiritual energy there. According, the Sajmarg meditation that I do, the third master was, a bunch of the people around him wanted him to go to Israel. And he went to the Wailing Wall. There's this Jewish guy that used to talk about this. I think he got banned on Facebook, but somehow I saw one of his videos, and they used to recommend all his videos. And there's this Wailing Wall, and he used to say that they thrust their pelvis. You can find videos. I call it humping the wall. And they thrust their pelvis into the wall. It's this weird shit. And we're going to be talking about the foreskins and I was talking about this in my last video, the obsession with sexuality and weird sexuality and circumcision and all that shit. And, humping the wall. And so, there's a lot of stuff here, right? And, this relationship is parasitic. And if you're in a relationship and you're being like with a succubus, right? Like which I had a marriage like this. And the person's just sucking your energy, sucking you dry, and you feel depleted. It's like that worm tongue. If you ever see the Two Towers movie, the second movie of The Lord of the Rings, where there's this guy Wormtongue and the King Theoden. It's a great example of this. Like, you can see Theoden's has this gray color, and he has a spell cast on him. And when you're in a relationship that's like where somebody's, or a group of people, sometimes it's your job, and you're just depleted. When I was going through the divorce and breaking free from this thing, there was a young Indian girl who was like a doctor. She was friends with my kids. And we talked a little bit. We didn't know each other that well. And she walks up to me and goes, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Fuck, why are you asking me that?" It's weird. I'm not a friendly person, right? And, and I'm like, "Why? Why do you say that?" And she goes, "Well, because you look gray and you're all hunched over. You look like you're dying." I'm like, "Holy shit," right? Because my kids were all, I had a daughter who was at risk and who would eventually commit suicide. And, my kids were behind in homeschooling, and my family was a mess. And my ex had abandoned us, which was like the best thing that ever happened. But until once I was free from her, like my energy level returned and all this stuff. She was like a succubus, right? And you have these relationships like that. And Israel's that relationship. It's a one-sided relationship where the parasite can't exist without the host. And so they do everything possible to lie and gaslight and keep this thing going. But, it's obviously a fucking abusive relationship. Because, like, what are you getting out of the relationship with Israel? What am I getting? Right? I mean, other than circumcision, right? Like, fucking, why are Christians being circumcised? I'm going back. I'll talk about that when I get to the Bible. Alan Dershowitz is his name.
A lot of people have been talking about Erika Kirk, about her behavior. I have to admit, too, it looks pretty weird.
No one will ever replace my husband, but I do see some similarities of my husband in JD and Vice President JD Vance. I do.
It's just a weird thing to say, right? Just a fucking weird thing to say. I think these guys are Republicans, but whatever. I don't know who they are, but Myron Gaines is his name. I can see from the thing right here. It says right here, Myron Gaines. So whenever I get a video that pops and I get a lot of new people that, somehow YouTube recommends it goes out there. It used to be like, again, hundreds of thousands, millions in some cases. Now it's just like some thousands. But either way, I get a lot of people that are, there are a lot of Christian Republicans that are watching my last video. And the thing that they're most upset about, like last time I looked at 92% approval, which is usually gets like 96, 97, sometimes 100, depending on the amount of views, right? So I looked at that because of the comments. Now, there were only a few comments, maybe one or two. I'll read one of them. Some guy accuses me of being obsessed with Erika Kirk. But the majority of comments are that she sucks. And the people who are upset with me were upset because I said that the Bible isn't the Word of God, which I'll cover again today in the comment section when I read the comments. But that seemed to be the biggest reason people were upset. Not because most of them were in agreement. I mean, they're calling her Jezebel and Delilah and other things. They don't like her. Like the people who are still supporters of her and TPUS gay, which we'll get into that again. Maybe I'll even go to their channel. For the most part, they see through this. They don't like her, right?
Understands.
And they're looking for somebody. I'll talk about this in the comment section, but they're looking for some place to verbalize their opinion. Because even Candace Owens won't go after her when everyone else is like, boy, she sucks.
The fight that we're up against. He's an amazing man.
She's in a difficult spot because her husband dies, so everyone obviously feels for her. But then I think between her doing the weird Instagram story, holding his hands as he's in the casket, these weird photo ops of like crying without tears, and it's starting to leak out. People didn't want to talk about this at first. I didn't give a shit because it was so fucking fake.
Just like with the Trump assassination attempt, because of my channel, I'm not. See, these people who are in the show, they're affected by it, right? They care about the opinion of the powers that be, whether they admit it or not. They're part of the show. And we're not part of the show. You have some little channel and no one gives a fuck about you, right? Like I'm just like some little fucking hermit. I mean, I could be like a homeless guy and do what I do. I could like be living in a cardboard box and do the same show. Like I could be like fucking right now being outside in a cardboard box, shivering in the cold, doing this show, right? It's like low tech, whatever. And so, I don't care. And, I can just say the truth. And I'm not affiliated with any of these groups. The one group that I'm affiliated, my meditation, the fourth master of the system fucked us. And he turned it into a cult, and I was able to, like the rest of the people that do it, they can't say what I'm saying. Like I made videos about it, and they were all watching it, this like 2-3 years ago. And they still wouldn't come out. They don't fucking know what I say, and they just won't say it, right? Because they're all, they have positions in the mission. They have connections. Like I'm completely free of any kind of, systemic. I mean, we're all addicted to the system, but I'm just not influenced by it, right? And and I'm not bragging. It's just the way, it's just my situation. And so I can just say shit, right? And you get older too. You just like the older. I'm in my 60s now. You see death is waiting for you. Like, death is a regular part of my existence now. Like I hurt myself sleeping pretty much every night. I wake up and I've slept wrong on one part of my body or another. One shoulder hurts, the other one does. I'm just, and I just, I slap some DMSO on it and get up and I get going, right? But anyways, not recommending anything, just saying what I do. All right, let's go to the next thing. Look at this fuck, right? And her fake crosses, all her bullshit. Okay, so I'm just going to give a little bit of coverage to this.
The Bible in a year, cover to cover. It's amazing. We've had over the Bible in a year, cover to cover. It's amazing. We've had over to cover.
Okay, so she made that weird expression.
I don't think I need to tell Erika that.
Yeah.
Erika
She didn't. He did the same thing.
is very shrewd.
She's very shrewd.
I don't think I need to.
Shrewd is not a good word. I don't think shrewd is a good word, right? When I hear shrewd, I mean, it can be given as a compliment, but it's not the loving, grieving widow who's a good Christian and a good mom. She could be frugal. I mean, shrewd is probably a much worse word than frugal. And it's also, I mean, in terms of her business sense, but it's not a compliment. And for someone like her particularly, like being loving and, spiritual and, all these things. You wouldn't say, yeah, shrewd, that shrewd motherfucker over there, right? Okay, a shrewd person is someone who's clever with sharp practical judgment and good business sense. This can be being insightful, resourceful, and able to understand situations quickly to their advantage, while also using positivity to describe someone who is astute, and also be a negative connotation associated with cunning or deception, although it doesn't necessarily imply dishonesty. But, I've never associated this with being something positive. And if you get rid of the D in shrewd, you get shrew, right? And a little animal that, has a specific kind of look to it, right? A very, interesting look that it has. And, there's whatever. So given Charlie Shekels' position, Erika Shekels now, and getting the money, getting the shekels, I would say that him describing her as shrewd is not a good thing. And shrewd is not something you would associate with somebody grieving, right? It's something that, it's a quality that would leave you when you would go through the grieving process. But, she is, like he said, a cunning businesswoman, which is, I think a good description of her. Anyways, she has a hardness in her.
Lying. If I'm pretending I know...
Yeah, this is, he's slamming Chris Cuomo's here.
I would also put as a subset of lying, if I'm pretending I know something that I...
You know, if you make videos, don't put music behind it. Like, if people are too stupid or too fucking bored that they can't listen to somebody for a minute long in a short fucking video without music, holy shit, right? You should, you know, it's just distracting and off-putting.
don't know it all, and I'm taking a very strong opinion, and with 5 minutes of research, you could find out that this is completely false, that's another form of lying. Now, sir, you have completely shirked all of your responsibility, and now you're pointing the finger at China. By the way, you were one of the people who demonized Donald Trump for calling it the China virus at the time, okay?
It comes from China. That's why.
Entire
China. All right, so there's that.
network also called everyone racist if we speculated that it came from the lab. I would also...
All right, so Chris Cuomo. This is pretty funny.
I won. I won.
I won.
I didn't expect it. I played it cool, but it's recently now been announced that it is me. I am the Anti-Semite of the Year. Some people walked...
They have an award for Anti-Semite of the Year. Is that a thing?
So I could run. I can think of no person who walked further than Kanye West, my dear friend. But I do want to borrow from his Grammy acceptance speech because it's incredibly relatable. Take a listen.
Everybody want to know what I would do if I didn't win. I guess we'll never know.
Woo! I did it, you guys. I guess we'll never know. You guys thought I was going to spaz out, freak out. No, I won. Fair and square. Take that. I'm very proud of myself. Thank you for all of you who voted for me, and I will do my best in the future to win Anti-Semite of the Galaxy.
Boom. All right, that's pretty funny. And it's funny because there's a category. Like they have a, you know, they put a list out of anti-Semites, right? And so that's like, you know, that's where we're at right now. So this is from, it was 8 months ago, I think it said, Israeli live TV. They're stronger together here.
Our final story, the Anti-Semite of the Year for 2024 has been revealed, and it's no other than disgraced conservative pundit Candace Owens. The so-called award is bestowed by
Disgraced.
Stop Anti-Semitism, a leading nonpartisan U.S.-based organization that combats anti-Semitism. On announcing the honor, Stop Anti-Semitism wrote that from defending Hitler's actions in Germany and mocking Jewish fears over...
Okay, so I saw that clip, and she didn't do that. She said something different. She said that nationalism, whatever. Her comment was about nationalism, and that most people could think of nationalism as like Hitler, and she thinks that being a national, whatever. But you know, Stop Anti-Semitism Awards, Candace Owens, the title, and you know the fact is now she has the #1 blog, so that should probably scare the shit out of you, right? Like, or she has a #1 podcast, so that's what that did for her. That's the kind of, you know, boost you get from that award. So YouTube recommended this to me from the Christian Broadcasting News.
It's been nearly 2 months since Charlie Kirk was assassinated, and Fox News host Jesse Waters is now opening up about how...
Is there any non-gay Christian Republican white guys out there? You know, the non-white guys, Christian, gay, white, whatever they are. These dudes that are on TPUS gay, and this guy, like, does this guy also appear gay to you? Right? I mean, all at least, and certainly not, you know, like a heterosexual, like he's this gay, right? Like, there's, and I don't care about, you know, I've said this before, I don't care about any of these things. I don't have any, you know, demographic thing, this thing or that thing. I mean, now it's like all these things are coming out in terms of like, you know, what happened with the for years, the gay community was just wanting Christians to accept, you know, right-wing people to accept that you're born gay, which for the most part I agree with. There is also people who are sexually abused often, you know, that's something that can create someone being gay as well, you know, and whatever. And then also circumstances and and culture and things where people are pushed into something. Like now, you're more likely to be gay because, especially when the Bidens were when it was Democrats were in charge, and this culture was that way. But there are a lot of people who are just born gay. Like as the little kids, you can kind of tell, right? And as they get older, you can really tell. So I would agree with that. But then once that was sort of accepted, because the Christians were trying to take their kids to these anti-gay camps, right? And try to reprogram them. And it wasn't working because, they were, it's something there. It's some samskara, these samskaras I talk about, and these impressions that you bring from life to life. And so it's something that for this life, this is what you're going to be, right? And so I believe that for the most part, like I said, with some exceptions. But, some percentage, I don't know what it is, 60%, 40%, something, people are just born gay. But then after that was accepted, they said, well, everyone's a little bit gay. Like being gay is on the spectrum and everybody is a little bit gay. And that was the next thing they're pushing, right? And then when that came out like that, and then all the stuff that happened with the transgender stuff and all those things, biological men using the ladies' room and all this stuff that was not okay, it became, well, this was a bait and switch. It's one thing if you want Christians and right-wing people to accept everyone's gay. And it's another thing if you're going to accept that you're born gay. And then you're going to change that up, right? So you never really believed the born gay. You believed everyone's gay. This was the whole thing, whole movement. And so, but there's nothing funnier than right-wing Christians who are, prominent in the church, and then they're just obviously gay, and everyone ignores it, right? Like this guy.
It's changed him, even pushing him into a deeper understanding of the gospel and toward a more meaningful relationship with Jesus.
Like, holy shit, right? I mean, don't they have just normal heterosexual guys they can throw out here on TPUS gay and this show? Is that how, are they all gay on this thing? It's just what's happening, right? Like, what is happening? So Sky News was kind of good. Sky News Australia was kind of good. I think there's a Rupert Murdoch. It seems to be owned by some pro-Israeli piece of shit. And they mocked the shit out of the liberals and the Democrats and Joe Biden. And it was, it delivered some good shit during that period of time. But now Trump has ascended and, Trump sucks and the rest of it. And this is called Leftists Losing It, Soulless Ghoul Mocks Erika J. Kirk. I have been credited with bringing back the word ghoul, about in 2018 I called something the year of the ghoul. And then it started to be used. I don't know how much I had to do with it, but it had come through this thing. But now, these fuckers, well, let's watch this. She's supposed to be Australian, but I don't know what's going on here.
Grieving widow who lost the love of her life, the father of her 2 young children, in the most tragic circumstances, but for the left, well, it's just a reason to mock her.
No, it's also the right. I don't know if this person is the left-wing person, but, she's getting more shit from people on the right and people who were part of her husband's belief system, part of his group.
All right, Erika, this is your moment. This is your moment to shine. This is your moment to show America how amazing you are. Be the sad, grieving widow that you have always dreamed of. This is my moment. Fox News. My husband.
Now that is fucking funny, right?
Yes, we should have cameras in the courtroom. My husband was murdered.
These people really are soulless. Now, let's go to
They're soulless? They're soulless. They don't have souls? Have you read the fucking Bible? Have you heard about Ehud, right? I just talked about Ehud again, you'll hear it in the voiceover. But we get into Ehud and some of these other things that I talked about before in my last video. But anyways, to call them soulless, right? Erika Kirk, if anybody's soulless, right? She can't even grieve sincerely. whatever the fuck's going on there, whether the relationship is completely faked, whatever it is. And, you think that this is horrible, like this is coming just from the left. She's fake as fuck, and you're on the wrong side of this thing. Okay, I have these weird interactions whenever I go out now. Like I see like something that was like would indicate to me that things are breaking down, right? So I got a bunch of stuff to get into. I got a bunch of comments about Erika J. Kirk. That's another indication because, it seems like everybody, the majority of Christians and the majority of TPSU, US gay people are really against her, Erika Kirk. Like they see through the bullshit. And it was very indicative or very indicated in my comment section, which I want to get to, which shows you like, why are they still going with that shit, right? Like they can see it's not working. And she does things like whether it's the leather pants or groping J.D. Vance or, the fake crying, the things that are just off-putting. It's like she's getting worse, right? There seems to be a certain like glitching out and desperation with people. So, I go shopping like once a week, a lot of times on Monday, not always, but, today was Monday. And I go to a couple different stores, mostly like these health food stores. And I go to Whole Foods. And, I don't know, some of you guys might have heard my time I went to Whole Foods, or 2 times I went to Whole Foods. And there's a guy who shows me a piece of paper saying that he's deaf. And my immediate reaction was like, oh, fuck, right? But then the guy was fast, and I don't have to talk to him, which is like, I'm incapable of making small talk. Like, I just resist it. I just can't do it. And, and I always make fun of the weather. How about that weather, right? That weather's amazing. The weather, the weather, like people talk about that shit. It's like some kind of way of making sure the person's like, okay. It's like, serial killers, I'm sure, can chat about the weather. Like, I think sociopaths could probably, the serial killers and sociopaths are usually pretty charming. So I'm sure they're good at talking about the weather. It's not like, hey, that guy must be a serial killer. He couldn't talk about the weather. I said shit about the weather. He didn't say anything back. It's not an indication of whether the person's safe or not, whether they're talking, whatever you're trying to do in an uncomfortable situation with some stranger that you're on the elevator with. Hey, how about that weather? I'm pretty socially awkward with people. My wife is very personable, so she usually handles the interactions. And there's this old guy, and he's been my cashier before. I always look for the deaf guy because, like, he is really fast. I mean, he's twice as fast as anybody else in there. There's a guy, some skinny white dude, hippie, looking like Shaggy from Scooby-Doo, that my wife and I nicknamed the Sloth because he's like the slowest cashier in history. I don't know if the guy still works there. I think he was bagging today. But, so there's this old guy, and I think the old guy had tried to talk us into getting the job at Whole Foods. And by old guy, I mean probably in his 70s, white hair. And so there's a woman in front of me, and I'm waiting for her to go, and I have a bag that I put everything in because they give you those bogus paper bags, and they suck. I have like a little refrigerator bag. I bought these bags on Amazon. They're great. We use them for all kinds of things. But anyways, and they have different colors, so we have different things. Anyway. How about that weather? And so I go up to the guy, and he goes, "Is that 2-cycle motor oil that I smell?" And I'm like, what the fuck? First of all, how can you tell the difference between 4-cycle and 2-cycle? Like, I mean, you have the kind of sniffing, smelling abilities that you can differentiate between 2-cycle or 4-cycle motor oil. And I'm like, no, it's not, because fucking, I just came from my house, and, I have a chainsaw that has 2-cycle motor oil in it. Chainsaw oil, I think it's 2-cycle. It might not be. It's chainsaw oil. But other than that, I changed my, I put, air in my tire because there was an indicator that there's air in my tire was missing. But I can't imagine that there was anything, it wasn't something where I would be smelling like oil. And then he realized it was kind of a weird thing to say. And he goes, well, maybe it was the woman in front of you. And I'm like, that fucking prissy, yuppie bitch, right? Why would she smell like 2-cycle oil? And why would you have to wait till she was gone before you smelled it? And I'm like, this is really fucking weird, right? I'm like, let's go back to the weather. So then I go to drive out of the parking lot, and I'm going to take a right turn. And there's a woman who's taking a left turn, and she's trying to wave me on. You know, we're looking right at each other. And her car, you know, it's one of those situations where the only way I'm making that turn is if I clip the curb with my tire, which I don't want to do. Because she's got plenty of room. She's got like a car and a half worth of room to take a left turn where you get all the angle. You know how you can swing your car. It's always better to park and be in a parking lot to turn to your left than your right. You know, it's better to have more of an angle. You guys, you know, swing wide. And for her, she totally has more room than I do. And she's really just in my way. So I wave her on. I'm like, go. I'm taking a fucking left. I put on my signal. I'm taking a right. I put on my signal, and I'm like, you know, shit. Plus, she's already annoyed. She's trying to wave me on, like, with annoyed, like I'm fucking the thing up, right? Because she won't take a left turn, which she could have taken. She was sitting there before I got there. And I'm like, I can't do this without hitting the curb, and you can easily take this fucking turn, right? You know, I've been driving a long fucking time, and I know who has the better option to be able to turn here. And so I wave at her, you know, with kind of an attitude, you know, because I always have one. And it isn't even a good aisle. Like, we're not even, like, right in front of the store. Like, I park usually far away from the store because I don't mind walking. Usually what I like to do is park near a place where there's a place to drop off the cart, because you end up having to walk to put the cart away or whatever. And I like to park where it's just there's less cars, and just so it's not even like she doesn't even have to go down this aisle. So I'm like, you know, so I'm exclaiming, you know, I'm taking a fucking right, and you need to go. And then she like drives off, and she doesn't give me the finger, but she gives me the fingers. Like, she makes a gesture with her hand. You know, it's not the finger, and I'm like, Jesus fucking Christ, right? Like, you know, why didn't you do this in the first place? Like, you know, like you're incapable of taking a left turn in a parking lot. You're fucking the whole thing up. You probably shouldn't be driving, right? You're not, you know. But anyways, I'm going to get to the comments. I have to finish some of the clips, but I want to tell this story while it's fresh. And I want to talk about two things. Somebody wrote me and said that her daughter has dyslexia, like a young kid, like 2 or 3, I think. And also, I had a realization about swearing. And so, you know, I've been getting all these comments about swearing, almost like it's some kind of spammed attempt to get, you know, all these people, please don't swear, stop swearing, whatever it is. Don't take the Lord's name in vain, all these kind of things. And, you know, this is my channel. I get to do it. You don't get a say here. But I realized that in my household, my dad was encouraging me to swear. My dad was a guidance counselor, so he wasn't some uneducated boob, you know, some fucking, you know, miserable ex-convict or something. But he was, you know, he encouraged me to swear. He brought me to Mel Brooks's Blazing Saddles when I was like a little kid, like 6 or 7 years old. You know, my brother swore. He was a Vietnam vet, and, you know, he swore a lot. And, you know, my sister was a hippie. She swore. My mom was a devout Irish Catholic who was against it but could do nothing about it. You know, she could have put her foot down. I think I had a bar of soap in my mouth at one point. But, you know, my parents were, you know, my siblings, my brother was 17 years older than me. His younger sister was, you know, my older sister was 15 years older. And there's a middle sister who was, I think, 13 years older. And then my youngest sister was 10 years older than me. And there was a miscarriage before and after me, because my parents were Catholic, or my mom was at least. And so there's a shit ton of kids. There was 5 kids, and there could have been 8. My mom was a small woman with a lot of health issues, not physically strong. She cranked out a lot of kids. And I'm like bigger than everybody, like significantly so. My brother's like 5'9", 5'8". You know, he said 5'10", but I don't think that's true. And I'm like 6'1", and just, you know. And so my dad's 5'10", 5'9". And everyone else is shorter than them. So, like, I'm taller than the rest of them. It's kind of a weird thing. My dad encouraged me to swear. This is like, this conversation, I've talked about this before. So I was in elementary school, and one of my friends said there's only two ways to have babies. One was to have kids. One was to be adopted, and the other one was to fuck, right? And I kind of knew what fucking was, and I was pretty sure it was gross, right? Like I was, whatever it was. And the thought came to me, my parents did that? My parents, Jesus, like that bothered me. So I'm a really young kid. Like I'm 6, 7 years old. And because I discovered my dad's Playboys when I was 7. So, I would have figured that they were like having sex. You know what I mean? But it hadn't happened yet. So my mom's driving me home. We had this weird Maverick car that my sister ended up getting. And if she drove me somewhere, like if you were riding in the car, she'd take the key out of the car, and we'd walk away and go into the house, and it was still bucking. It was still like, trying to run, even without the key. This kind of fucking old carburetor piece of shit they had back then. And so usually I just sat in the car and looked out the window. I was always a quiet kid. I daydreamed a lot. But I get in the car and I'm like, Mom, am I adopted? And she's like, what? Why would we say that? I'm like, well, some kid at school said that the only way you can have kids is if you adopt them or you fuck. Did you and Dad fuck? Right? And my mom, who's Irish Catholic and, very, she never swore. She was just whatever. And she was like, well, I wouldn't put it quite that way, dear. And so that was my upbringing. So there was swearing. My dad encouraged me to swear. My family swore, and my friends swore. And there was not really anything out there to stop me from doing it. My dad had taken the belt to me, tried to hit me with a belt. I don't know. He was really mad at me. And, my parents had been so weakened. This is why I said the stuff about my siblings being older. My older brother and sisters all came back to the family and were like, you guys sucked as parents. And, as you get older, you have difficulty disciplining your kids. And I was like, I was smarter than my parents, significantly so. Like we played board games or card games, and I would tell them what to do because they were just, I was a quicker thinker. There's a whole thing, but I'll get into this more with the dyslexia thing. And so my parents were, old, and they were like, now they had a lot of doubt about their parenting ability. And they were pretty much just checked out. Like they gave up trying to raise me as a kid or whatever. Like I was just doing shit on my own, like all the time. And, they both worked when I was growing up. So I'd come into the house and it's amazing I didn't burn the house down like multiple times. And so, my parents were like, we didn't really talk, and they didn't really, it was almost like I was invisible in some ways. So my dad got mad at me, and he used to take a belt to my brother. I think he was pretty angry. He was Italian, Sicilian. And, I think it was pretty tough on my brother. My brother talked about it to some extent. And, he was, my dad and I were kind of like friends when I was a little kid. And then I realized he was like a complete piece of shit. Like a few things happened. Like my mom sent me to school with Neosporin on a lip sore that I had, like a big glob of Neosporin that looked just like a booger. And she told me not to wipe it off. And, I was like a good kid in some ways, and I obedient. And so I walked to school, 2 blocks to school, and I show up with a big glob of Neosporin that looks a lot like a booger. And you know how well that would go over. And I realized, I can't trust these fuckers. Like, I already knew this about my dad. Like, they were just, uncool, and I was just going to have to figure things out on my own. And so my dad's really mad at me, and he takes a belt and he starts whipping me with it, hitting me with the belt. It kind of hurt, but I looked at his face, and I just started laughing. And he hit me, and I started laughing harder. Like, I just was laughing at him. And, he was getting rattled because he's like, I'm going to have to put this kid in the hospital. And even then, he was, he was completely, impotent, like he couldn't hurt me. And I was like laughing. I didn't know it was a big moment, but I think he realized he couldn't discipline me and he wasn't going to outsmart me. So I was just kind of left on my own, right? But either way, this is what I grew up with. And so I have all these people showing up on my channel now who are Christian because of the Erika Kirk thing. And you guys grew up, and, you know, your parents didn't worry about them being serial killers, being serial killers or murderers, you know, these types of things. And I'm going to get into that with, before I dig to the comments, I'm going to reread some of these weird Bible verses I read in my last video, which I should make that video public when I'm done with this. You know, that's why you guys are more upset about me swearing than you are about Donald Trump and, you know, Jeffrey Epstein and these other things, because your parents told you all the time not to swear. And they disciplined it, and it became ingrained in you and your, you know, Christian schools and your people and your friends' parents, and everyone's telling you not to swear is a big deal. But I had the exact opposite. And so this is my channel. Like, you have your own channel. You have your own fucking people that you identify with, whatever it is. But this is my thing. And this is what I do and what I feel comfortable with. And, you know, it's kind of funny. And, you know, when it's done appropriately or with the proper timing and whatever. But it's just a part of what I do here. There's times when YouTube used to demonetize videos for excessive vulgarity, and I wasn't swearing at all, and I used to go boop, which was funny for a while. Like, I would self-censor. Instead of saying the swear, I would say boop, and that was pretty funny too. But either way, you know, that's what I do, and if you're uncomfortable with it, it's because you and I grew up differently. You know, and there's plenty of people who like it. Like, you know, this channel's not just for you. This isn't, I'm not catering to your specific needs. This is not your personal channel. You know, there's people who like the long videos. Other people complain about them. So it's always going to be something, and you have to adapt, right? So my dyslexia story, my mom and my dad were really incompetent, as I said before. I mean, you know, almost criminally incompetent as parents. And, you know, I was going to school, and I thought I was doing great, but I had trouble differentiating between my B's and my D's and my P's and my Q's, right? And there was limited diagnoses when I grew up. There's no ADHD, which I didn't have. You know, there's dyslexia. There was one of those things. And so I went to this Yale. You know, Yale has all those weird fucking mind control things, but this is like in the 70s. And they had a kids program, and somehow, you know, I went for extensive psychological testing. And it's luckily they didn't identify me as something. And, you know, and maybe they did. But it wasn't something where they wanted to pursue a relationship with me, you know, these governmental people. And, you know, my dad used to always embarrass me. Like, he was just loud, and I was always a shy kid. We go into order at McDonald's, and he make a big, you know, just one of those people that's always, like, you know, looking for attention and just whatever. You know, he wanted to be a comedian or some shit. And he was standing behind a two-way mirror, and there's like 10 other people with him. And they were observing me, and my dad was there. And I knew there was a two-way mirror, and I knew my dad was there, but I didn't know anybody else was. And so I started giving him the finger, and I humiliated the shit out of him. I embarrassed the shit out of him. Like, I'm like, you know, 9 years old, something like that. And so I got these tests, and I had a really high IQ, which kind of intimidated my parents, and a non-specific learning disability. You know, so that's what I grew up with, this idea that I had a non-discernible learning disability. And, you know, my mom was very clear I wasn't dyslexic, and that's the only thing I, you know, heard. And dyslexic is like a horrible word for dyslexic people. It's hard to pronounce. It's really hard to spell. Like, it's weird. It starts off with like 4 consonants. I mean, a terrible word for something that's, you know, like, is a perceptual thing. And so I grew up with, you know, just this idea that I had some kind of learning disability, like I had a high IQ and, you know, I had a high reading level because I read all that shit. You know, I used to go to the library and read things about animals and stuff. So I grew up with that. And then my ex started to homeschool our children. You know, I didn't really want much of a part of that. I mean, I tried to be included, but I wasn't an educational person because I didn't really like school. And at some point, some of the kids showed signs of some issues, like some whatever it is. And my ex was like, you know, you have dyslexia. And I'm like, well, she goes, well, the kids might have it, but they're not as clear as you are. But you certainly have it. And she sent me a few links. And I read it, and it described me to a fucking T, right? And the one thing my mom had already said is, you don't have dyslexia. And I think she was worried about hurting my self-esteem or some shit. And, nothing was done there was no plan in place for whatever I was going through academically. And so I call my mom up. I'm like fucking 30, right? I'm like 35 maybe. I'm like, hey, I have dyslexia, Mom. You said I did. And she goes, oh, yeah, of course you do. And I'm like, why didn't you say anything? She goes, I don't know. I'm like, well, that could have been fucking helpful. When I went through various levels of education, I've now got my master's degree. It would have been helpful if I knew I was dyslexic that whole time. Jesus Christ. And by the way, it's still gross that you and Dad fucked. But anyways, so what I learned was that dyslexics have, they are, have the see things from the whole. Like people learn from individual parts and puts the parts together. But dyslexics have to understand a whole concept, which, is superior in some ways, in terms of pattern recognition. I learned how to juggle, for example. And the way I learned how to juggle is I was watching some guy juggle on TV, and then I slowed the balls down in my mind as I was watching him, and I saw the pattern. I saw what he was doing. Like you throw one ball under the other ball, and like that one ball's up in the air. With the other hand, you throw the ball under that, and you catch the other ball, and there's a whole pattern. It's a very easy pattern to see, and when I saw it, I just practiced for like a day, and by the end of the day, I was juggling because I saw the pattern. And it's really helpful in what I do here because I have good pattern recognition, right? And so, dyslexic people, if you look at some of the people who have been really successful, some of these people, and there's a long list of them, you can, throughout history, who are dyslexic, who, achieved great things because of the pattern recognition. So, there's all these different learning styles, and dyslexia is one of them. And it's got benefits. Of course, there's issues, especially with traditional education, but, it's looking at it as a disability is the wrong thing, right? It's our school system needs you to learn in a certain way. There's all these different learning styles. There's people who are not very academic, but they're brilliant at fixing machines. They're great mechanically. They're great at farming. They're great at these types of things. I mean, you meet people like that, they talk to you about stuff like even if I'm a little bit mechanically inclined. My grandfather was really great at building things. And I have some level of skills that have been getting better with homesteading. But I'll meet somebody who does it professionally, and I'm like, they're talking about shit to me, and I'm like, yeah, I have no idea, right? Like, that's just, I'm not into that. But there are people who have different ways, different ways of learning. They're suited to different type of work and different ways of understanding things. And our school system doesn't have that in it. And so, people who have dyslexia, there needs to be strategies, and there needs to be, not this idea that you're fucked. Same thing with ADHD and all these things, which is those things usually can be changed by diet. But different learning styles, you have to find the appropriate way for the educational system to accommodate those type of things. And homeschooling is probably, one of those ways. So I've been explaining how the Bible isn't the Word of God. This is along with the swearing. Like if you grew up and everyone's telling you the Bible's the Word of God and, it's a sacred thing, it's been drilled into your fucking brain, since you were a young kid. And you just, you respect and honor your parents and you love them. Just the same thing like the military's been, like these right-wing people have been told the Bible, the military, the Bible, the military, the Bible, Israel, these things. And it's hard to break free from that level of indoctrination, right? But there's weird shit in the Bible, and I read a bunch of these things. And I was talking to my wife about it. We were kind of joking about it and some of these things. And I was saying, it'd be interesting to find out, well, I know what happened. Like there are rules and laws, in Connecticut where I grew up, there was all these blue laws that they had, maybe it was a radio DJ or a news segment was reading some of these blue laws. And one of the laws was you can't walk your bear into town. So it's not hard to figure out how that law came into being, right? Because when you become a disciplinarian, you have to have rules. I worked in a treatment center, and there was a kid there before I got there. and the kid was a cutter. He was self-abusive. And so these kids were in what was called restriction. And, when they were punished and they had to be away from the group, and they used to be able to be in their rooms with the doors closed. But this kid had to sit, he had the room right across from where staff would sit. There was 3 hallways, and there was various doors. There's like 5 doors on one hallway and 5 on the other, and I think 5 on each, in each hallway, because there's a maximum 15 kids. And there's a couch there, a chair there. You could see all 3 hallways, and someone had to be assigned to restriction, right, and had to be there with them. And they didn't want this kid to feel weird. And maybe there was another kid that was cutting. So they made all the kids sit in their doorways. And the problem with that is the kids weren't supposed to be interacting because they were on restriction. And they would get into fights, or they would act out, and they would plan things. And it was a fucking disaster. And it was a weird rule that, they made all the kids sit in the hallways for one kid. And that kid ended up leaving, and they kept the rule. And then when we took over one end of the week, we said, we're scrubbing that rule. We're putting the kids in the rooms, and everything was so much better. So there's reasons that rules are made. That's what I'm saying. If somebody brings a bear into town, their pet bear, and it mauls somebody, well, then they're going to make a rule about it. So with that in mind, these biblical teachings, Deuteronomy 25:11, 12, if 2 men are fighting and the wife of one of the men comes to rescue the husband from his assailant, and she reaches out and seizes him by his private parts, you shall cut off her hand, show her no pity. So this must have been a common problem back in Israel at that time, right? That there would be men fighting. You got to realize the kind of time period. There wasn't the kind of law and order we have now. There wasn't guns and things like that. And, maybe there was some sort of, whatever there was, like there was a king and things like this. But, the king, the security, the army was there more to, the armies of these various people. They were probably bullying lots of people. Not probably, going to farms. And, people would come over your house and steal your shit and rape you and your wife. And, like fucking... I'm not laughing at that, but it's like, that's how it was, right? If you're walking down the street, they saw something, you're wearing something they like, and they were, there's 2 of them and 1 of you, they just come and take it from you, right? And so, they didn't have, that's why they're saying, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, because they were dealing with primitive fucking people. And, primitive in the sense of, uneducated and, not understanding the concepts that we understand, but they were better in some ways because they were farmers, and they were more like people than we are, right? But they were unsophisticated, and they didn't have the kind of societal things that we have. As much as people hate police, and as much as they hate how oppressive things are, if you take those things away, you see how people are when there's nothing stopping them from doing bad things, right? It only takes 10%. So when I was in a treatment center, I worked as a clinician. And this is back when Eminem was just really becoming popular. And there was a kid in there, this white kid, who loved Eminem, and he was like a fucking total nightmare. And he was in there because his, in terms of his sexual offense, he was in there because his dad was dating this woman who he hated. And so he decided to break them up by abusing the woman's daughter that was like half his age, sexually abusing her. Like, that's how fucked this kid was. He was a real sociopath. And he was on my client list. And you could tell this kid was like really fucking, one of like I had all these different kids that I counseled, and this one was like definitely sociopathic. And we were talking, and he said something about how the only reason people wouldn't murder is because there are laws. And I said, there's lots of people who wouldn't murder. There's lots of people who don't have the, they would not murder somebody. They would maybe in self-defense, but they wouldn't murder people because it would make it feel bad. They have a conscience. They see that as a bad thing. And he was like, no fucking way. Like, he couldn't believe that. we were talking about this for like 10 minutes. I'm like, oh, this fucking kid's is a freaking sociopath, right? And so there are people like that out there. And it only takes 10% of those people, marauding people that come through town and just steal your shit and, whatever it is, rape your family, these things, right? I mean, this is the kind of people that exist in the world. And, without any sort of, rules and laws, they're going to just go apeshit and just do all the things they want to do, right? So a lot of these religions were trying to teach all the people, don't kill, don't steal, don't covet your neighbor's wife, all that kind of commandments. But this isn't higher level spirituality. This is just teaching people not to be fucking brutes. It's, God is strong and powerful. God will punish you, you dumb fucking crazy animal fucking savage, if you don't behave, right? Like it was trying to teach people, don't do all these basic fucking horrible things. And that's not spirituality. That's not even, it's God is going to punish you, you sinning piece of shit, right? And so that's what these religions are about. They're not there's much higher levels of religion where, people who don't have to be told not to murder. People don't have to be told these things because they'll just, they're looking to serve God and not, go beyond all this other shit, right? And so, there was a problem where two husbands and men used to fight, and a wife would come out and grab the other guy's junk, right? And they decided an appropriate consequence for that was to cut off her hand. Now, I'm not sure what the thinking here is, but I think it seems to be like it's almost like a sexual act for her to grab. I mean, certainly sexual violence, but I don't know. I don't fucking know, right? But either way, that was a rule. That was a problem they had. Women, engaging with two men fighting and grabbing their junk, and they thought, well, let's stop that. So what can we do to deter women from doing that? Well, let's cut off their hands when they do that, right? And so, this is why I'm talking about this being a shitty book. The one above that. Yet she multiplied her whoredom in calling them to remembrance the days of youth, wherein she had played the harlot in the land of Egypt, for she doted upon the paramours whose flesh is as the flesh of asses, and whose issues is like the issues of horses. The flesh of asses is the flesh of asses is their penises, and the issues of horses their balls and their semen. And so they're equating not following their religion, because I asked about this and I found out with this bet, with these various towns that were flirting with other religions and going back to all this stuff with idol worship and shit. And so to deter that, they said, you guys are whores that will sleep with fucking donkey dicks and horse balls, right? That if you leave our religion, that's the kind of person you are, and that's the kind of person everyone's going to know you as, right? So these are like consequences and warnings for people, and some of these things are probably okay, like thou shalt not kill is a positive thing, but it's worded in a negative way. It's worded as a negative suggestion, which is always something that's difficult. The other thing is, at a lodging place, here's another one. At the lodging place on the way, the Lord met Moses and was about to kill him. But Zipporah took a flint knife, cut off her son's foreskin, and touched Moses' feet with it. Surely you are such a bridegroom of blood to me, she said. So the Lord let him alone. So they're saying God was going to kill him for not circumcising his child, his son, which he had to do in 8 days, which is this is, genital mutilation. It's, God didn't create foreskins to be cut off. That's, all of us who have had that done, we've experienced some sexual mutilation. We're too young to remember it, but the damage there, it's a trauma, right? And it makes men more aggressive and other things, and it's not a part of the Christian religion. It's a part of the Jewish religion, and somehow it's become a part of the American, allopathic medical community. 70 or 80% of American men are circumcised, and it's a full circumcision. It's different what they do for Judaism. It's because of this bullshit book, and it's a bullshit book. It's got fucked up things in it, and fucked up things are done to people, and there's, and certainly to young babies, male babies. I mean, this is like, where they cut off the clitoris in young women in these various countries. Like, it's a mean thing to do. It's a horrible thing. And so fuck this. This is, this has affected me personally, so fuck you. Fuck all this, anybody who believes in this bullshit, because it's doing damage to people. And also this bullshit relationship with Israel, this is a part of that, right? So I'm going about this in reverse order here. This is the one before that. No one who has been emasculated by crushing or cutting may enter the assembly of the Lord. My wife pointed out that she thought this was people who were transgender or whatever, I don't know if that was something that they did back then. So I guess this would be interpreted as that. But, it's a weird thing to be doing, right? The way it's worded is, no one who has been emasculated by crushing or cutting may enter the assembly of the Lord. It sounds to me like they are talking about, and I'll look for the rest of the quote here. Let me look that up. But it sounds like they're talking about somebody doing that to you, right? Not something that you did yourself. It seems to be here they're talking about how it's about eunuchs. Deuteronomy states, emasculate to or have his male organ cut off shall not enter the assembly of the Lord. This verse is interpreted as setting up a standard for ritual purity and separation for the Israelite community, with eunuchs being excluded from the religious congregation. And so, eunuchs, where they used to cut these guys' balls off. Remember, they had these kids who were good singers and had good soprano voices, much like Michael Jackson. Remember, he was done this with chemicals. He was given chemicals to keep his testosterone down. They were called castratos in Italy, but they would cut off their nuts so they would be able to sing better, right? So like weird fucking shit. People do weird fucking shit. I mean, there's a lot of weird shit, probably even more weird shit now because people are more fucked up. But I mean, you got to think about it. You got to understand that this is humanity. Eunuchs in the Bible refer to a variety of individuals, including castrated men, those born with a condition that makes them unable to reproduce, and those who chose celibacy, which I don't know if they did that by cutting off their genitalia. In the Old Testament, they often serve as trusted officials in royal courts, overseeing harems, while in the New Testament, Jesus categorized 3 types of eunuchs: those born that way, those made eunuchs by others, and those who chose to be eunuchs from the kingdom of heaven. The prophet of Isaiah offers a future where eunuchs will have a place in God's house if they hold fast to his covenant. So Jesus, fucking. From Elisha went up to Bethel. This is 2 Kings 2:23-24. From there, Elisha went up to Bethel. As he was walking along the road, some boys came out of the town and jeered at him. "Get out of here, Baldy," they said. Get out of here, Baldy. He turned around, looked at them, and called down a curse on them in the name of the Lord. Then 2 bears came out of the woods and mauled 42 of the boys. Now, I would assume that Elisha was somebody who was, let me just search to see who this was. It's a prominent person, right? And so this is saying, if you make fun of a prominent person, Elisha is venerated as a prophet of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and writings of the Baha'i faith refer to him by name. Elisha was, according to the Hebrew Bible, a Jewish prophet and a wonder worker. His name was commonly translated into English as Elisha, which is the same thing via Hebrew and these other things. So this was like a saint, a person with so-called spiritual powers. And so they're saying, if you make fun of somebody like this, they'll curse you. And, this is, again, sending out a warning to people. You got to hold these clergy people up, these pedophile clergy and these fucking creeps. And if you say anything bad about them, they'll curse you, right? This is very commonplace in religions. This one about Ehud reached for his left hand, drew a sword from his right hand, and plunged it into the king's belly. From the handle sank in after the blade, and his bowels discharged. Ehud did not pull out the sword, and the fat closed over it. So going here, I'm going to go to get more context to this. So this is 3:7. We're going to go to 3:20 here. The Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. They forgot the Lord their God and served the Baals and the Asherahs. The anger of the Lord burned against Israel, so that he sold them into the hands of Cushan Rashathan, king of Aram Naharan, to whom the Israelites were subject for 8 years. So the Lord sold them into slavery for 8 years. But when they cried over the Lord, he raised up for them to deliver Othniel, son of Keraz, Caleb's younger brother, who saved them. The Spirit of the Lord came on him, so that he became Israel's judge and went to war. The Lord gave Cushan Rishath, king of Arman, into the hands of Othniel, who overpowered him. So the land had peace for years until Othniel, son of Keaz, died. Again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. This is 12. This is entitled Ehud. And because of that, they did evil. The Lord gave Eglon, king of Moab, power over Israel, getting the Ammonites and the Amalekites to join him. A legion came and attacked Israel, and they took possession of the city of palms. The Israelites were subject to Eglon, king of Moab, for 18 years. So they were put into slavery again, because God was like, fuck you guys keep on forgetting about me. And now every time you do that, I'm going to make you guys slaves. Which shows you what kind of a prick God was, right? Like he couldn't inspire them through love. And, people deny God and don't embrace God, and God doesn't care. And I'll talk about God not having a mind, because someone asked me about that when I get to the comments. But, you can't use force. God has allowed people to choose not to worship him, right? You don't have to worship him. And then it says, after the Israelites came out of the Lord and he became them a deliverer, Ehud, a left-handed man, the son of Gerthram, a Benjamite, the Israelites sent him with tribute to Eglon, king of Moab. Now Ehud had made a double-edged sword about a cubit long, which he strapped to his right thigh under his clothing. This is totally the word of God. It's weird shit and detailed stuff and, not at all spiritual. There's a lot of warrior shit in here. They're very warlike. Yahweh used to be a cry of war. When they would go and kill these other people, they'd yell Yahweh, right? He presented the tribute of Eglon, king of Moab, who was a very fat man. After Ehud had presented the tribute, he sent on their way those who had carried it. But on reaching the stone images near Gilgal, he himself went back to Eglon and said, Majesty, I have a secret message for you. The king said to the attendants, leave us, and they left. Ehud then approached him while he was sitting alone in the upper room of the palace and said, I have a message from God for you. I know what this message is. Spoiler alert. It's a sword in the belly. As the king rose from the seat, Ehud reached for his left hand, drew the sword from his right thigh, and plunged it into the king's belly. Even the handle sank in after the blade, and his bowels were discharged. Ehud did not pull the sword out, and the fat closed over it. Then Ehud went out to the porch. He shut the doors of the upper room behind him and locked them. After he had gone, the servants came out and found the doors of the upper room locked, and they said, he must be relieving himself in the inner room of the palace. Well, he was, in a gross kind of way. They waited to the point of embarrassment, but when he did not open the doors of the room, they took a key and unlocked them, and they saw their lord fallen to the floor dead. While they waited, Ehud got away. He passed by the stone images and escaped Sierra, where he arrived, and he blew a trumpet in the hill of the country, Ephraim, and the Israelites went down with him from the hills, with him leading them. Okay, so, this is God. I have a present for you from God. God has a secret present for you. I'm going to bury my sword in your belly so you can get disemboweled. So, there's that. You will eat the flesh of your sons and the flesh of your daughters. I don't even know. I don't even know why they would say that. That must be some kind of a curse. As for those agitators, I wish they would go the whole way and emasculate themselves. That's another one, Galatians 5:12. And so, you get the idea here. And so these are, weird shit that was going on at that time, and them in either encouraging it or discouraging it, right? And either way, this is not the fucking word of God. It's a fucked book. Okay, so I just made meatballs for spaghetti and meatballs, and which will make my wife happy. She'll be happy about that. And I'm making a Greek salad for the salad. And now I'm going to get into the comments. So I wasn't able to get to all the comments, which hasn't happened in a long time. These are the comments that I just came in, right? And then I have a bunch from the video that got all the views about the Erika Kirk sending my wife a personal letter thing. So this one, Charlie, Shekels, hologram, and Old Testament. I put an E on the Old Testament, not purposely. I'm just noticing. I do this shit for once in a while. Testament's obsession with foreskins. So I mentioned that Fetterman was like a complete joke, and that, he gave the worst press conference. He just had a stroke, and he was not articulate before. Fetterman was, he's just been a nightmare. And I said about how even after that, Pennsylvania rejected Dr. Oz. And this person wrote, I'm from Pennsylvania. We would have voted for Fetterman over Oz even if Fetterman was dead. You have to understand, Pennsylvania, we don't take shit here. We didn't like Oz coming in here like he cared about PA. He didn't even live here. It's hard to explain. We didn't like the rich guy sashaying in here like he's all that. You're bragging about electing Fetterman. Now, there's Fetterman. I'm glad Fetterman got elected. I got plenty of, I'm glad you guys did this. I'm 100% for Fetterman. And me and Fetterman have something in common, and it's we don't like to dress in suits and ties. And so, at least I have that in common with Fetterman. I have nothing in common with Dr. Oz. But I was making fun of Fetterman before the stroke. And he was so fucked up that he came into, he was sworn into office, and then he went immediately to a psych ward where one of the high-ranking Democratic officials said that he went to visit Fetterman, and Fetterman was so fucked up, he was catatonic. You couldn't talk to him. And he was just making figure eights with his hand. Like, that's all he was doing. He was making figure eights with his hand, just staring at the wall. He was suicidal and, completely a wreck. And then when he finally did his job after 3 months of being in the psych ward, or 2.5 months or whatever it was, he couldn't process. Everybody talked like the adults on Charlie Brown. Wah, 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 wah. Right? Like Charlie Brown adults. And so he had to use a tablet to process things that are going on. He's just been a disaster. In a job where being able to understand people and communicate and talk is kind of important. And he couldn't talk and he couldn't listen. And, there's pretty much no job he could really do. He's basically disabled. And this guy's bragging about how Pennsylvanians don't take any shit, right? He's the worst. And he's there for 6 years. And again, don't get me wrong, I'm glad they did that, but holy shit. And then this person wrote, I talked about the Old Testament quite a bit. And I'm just going to leave the E on there, even though I did do it intentionally. Hey, Paul, no, shit, bro. I got so much actual real truth, dirt on Jesus, Abraham, and Paul, etc. It's ugly, bro, with an I. And in parentheses, the guy said, he made Mary eat his seed. I don't think we need to go down that. I was pretty salty when I made this video, but I don't think we need to go down that road. You're not going to have proof of that. And then another person wrote, am I a bad person because I enjoy whatever Paul condescendingly excoriates. I had to look that word up. Thanks for that. I missed it here. Excoriates those commenters he sees as intellectual and spiritually far beneath him. ? I find it most enthralling and funny part of Pockets of the Future. I can't help it. Okay, the Bible Don Casimo was also funny. Well, I don't know about, feeling good about it or not, but that's really based on your own, moral integrity. But the bottom line is these people are all being hostile to me, so I get to do this, right? They are giving me permission to do it. Now, they don't see it that way because they think they're God's, everyone's just waiting around to hear about what they think. I don't do what they do. Like, I don't go to videos and comment in a hostile way. Like, I don't go and tell people they're pieces of shit into their videos and whatever. In life, like, I mean, very seldom do I get into those kind of interactions because I don't want a relationship. There's a level of intimacy when you're in a battle with people. When people are in those, like, MMA fights, it's very, like, it's like sexual. Like, they go through, like, multiple, when they're grappling and doing jiu-jitsu or wrestling, they're in multiple sexual positions, right? And there's a level of physical intimacy. And then, when you are in conflict with somebody and you hate them, you're thinking about them all the time. Like, you're not being with your family and you're not loving the people that love you in your life. You're just hating somebody. And it just, it drives everyone else around you nuts. It becomes an obsession with people. So, like, I don't get into things like that with people. I'm not, But if they come here and try to shit on me, and say things that are untrue or just, come off superior or whatever it is, I get to do something that I like to do. It's a great thing for me because, I enjoy doing it and, they always deserve it, right? Because just because the internet, everyone's doing it, doesn't mean that you shouldn't think about what you're doing. Like, you're anonymously going and trying to tell people they're a piece of shit, right? I talk about this. One of the first really evil comments I got, that originally I made homesteading videos. And it was my family, my kids doing homesteading things, milking cows and building straw bale buildings. Some of you guys, the videos are still there. They're all privatized, I don't have a good relationship with my kids. And, when COVID happened, I had to privatize all my videos. And I don't want anything with my ex in it, those things. But, the first, 7 years of this channel were mostly about homesteading. And I did a few truther videos from time to time. It was a hobby. And so at some point I went full truther and some guy wrote, I used to love your videos when they were homesteading. And I'm, really happy to watch your mental breakdown. You going into some paranoid delusion. And the only thing is, I feel really sorry for your kids. I have the copy. I think I have a copy of that. I used to save these comments. Now there's too many of them. And I love that comment because it was so fucking, like, deliciously evil. The guy was, trying to be like a concerned troll. First buttering me up about the homesteading videos, but then saying how I was going into paranoid delusions about, I was breaking from reality. But I do feel so bad for your kids, and then also bringing my kids into it, right? Just an absolute fucking manipulative piece of shit, right? And so, I enjoy all that kind of stuff from a humor perspective. Everybody thinks it's their God-given right to critique whatever's on the internet, and I tell people this isn't an opinion-driven type of show. Because as for every person that says they don't like someone, there's something, there's another person that says they do. So it's not, I don't have some kind of consensus where I'm concerned about whether you like something or not, or whether you agree with it or not. I say this all the time. People leave these comments. I don't agree with everything you say, and I'm like, I don't even agree with everything I say, right? So, like, what are you fucking talking about? Like, the Paul of 2 weeks ago doesn't agree with the Paul of today. It's just like, or any of you, right? So that's life. Very seldom you're going to get two people that agree with everything, and if that was the case, that would be weird. And so when people come in and they just drop hostile shit, they are looking for the universe is calling for them to get like something back, right? There's always, you're coming in and using force, and there's always a counterforce, and I'm glad to provide it for people. Now, if people give me criticism that I know to be true, and it's accurate, and it's not done in a dickish way, again, it isn't for them to do, and I'm not asking, this is not it's unsolicited on their part. But it's almost, it's almost like they never see my real flaws, which I have lots of them, and I'm aware of them. I'm aware of them all. It's not like I'm not aware of them. When you meditate, you're aware of them. But people just, it's always about them. It's always about their projection of some bullshit thing inside them that they're trying to pin on me. And so that's why the comment section is, when you venture into that land, then, you're going to get rung up, and it probably sucks a lot worse for you than it does for me, because I kind of enjoy it, right? And, there's just a lot of dumb fucking people out there. I mean, when I talk about that, it's a specific thing. And so the person said, at 4:28, there's a hologram of Charlie Shekels on stage. I said it in the beginning. That was a hologram machine technology in that tent. They're telling you the truth in plain sight. Most will miss it, though. Well, you don't know that. Like, this is what I talk about. Like, I covered this because people said it to me. And I saw the machine, and I found a machine that looked like it, like a hologram machine that's $20,000. So it must be pretty good, right, if it's 20 grand. And it kind of looked like what that guy was taking down, but it wasn't an exact match. And it was, it was unclear. The photo was grainy at best. I mean, it wasn't a clear picture. But we don't know for sure. I mean, we don't know if Charlie's actually dead or not. We don't even know if his real name's Charlie. We don't know if any of these people are actually alive. I've never seen them in human life. I've never met them personally. And so, that's all, whatever it is. And so this is something I said in the video. The Lord doesn't want the dick smushed. You got to have some standards. Sometimes people quote me back to myself, and I realize it's funny. That should be on a T-shirt. Unfortunately, the T-shirt people have fucked me. I didn't get there. I sold a bunch of T-shirts here, $2,000 worth of T-shirts over a couple of years. So it wasn't great, but it was something. And it was $1,800, and they didn't pay me. They screwed me, and they still are sending me, things to. I mean, they just absolutely suck. That T-shirt company, and YouTube has a relationship with them. This is the first video I ever seen with foreskin in the title. Love your videos. Lots of people were happy with this title, and it wasn't intentional. Obviously, it was something that There's a ton of comments here. Okay, so there's about 10. There's 18 comments here. I'm going to read a bunch of them and not comment on all of them. And some of them are multiple comments these are ones about Erika Kirk. My wife got a personal letter from Erika Shekels Kirk. This is the video for that. She's not angry with God because when Charlie was killed, Erika was capitulated to the life of her dreams. Was capitulated? Yeah. The only thing necessary for triumph of evil is good. Men do nothing. Edwin Burke. Okay, she has a full wig on. Bad hair day. These are 3 comments that were in a row. There's more of those coming. You're no king, idiot, with TDS. I actually said that I dislike kings. Like when you come in and you say something stupid like that, like I said, I think kings are a bad thing. And I talked about how, they thought the greatest thing in the Bible was a king because people at that time, when you thought about a great thing, it was the greatest person was a king. So calling Jesus the King of Kings and calling God the King of Heaven was, the highest that these people could conceive of. But being a king, this idea that because of your genetics and your bloodline, you were born to rule, is a bullshit concept and is, it's past dated. And I don't respect royals or kings or any of these things. I certainly wouldn't want to be one. And I think, I'm pretty sure I was one in a past life and have, an aversion to it. So when you leave a comment like this, it starts off with, you're no king, idiot. I said the exact fucking opposite, right? So that means that you're just full of shit. Like you don't have the capacity to understand my videos, and then calling me with TDS, Trump derangement syndrome, which is just like the easiest fucking thing for retards to do, like for dumb fucks to do, right? Trump is a self-made man who never smoked or drank. He never smoked or drank. He never had any drank. He's not a self-made man. His dad gave him a company that was worth millions and started him off with a $15 million investment, and he ended up bankrupting that company 6 times. He's not self-made. He's kind and gentle. He speaks with truth and love, and he's not involved with any organized religion. He loves God and his word. You should appreciate him instead of acting like you're on to him. You're not. MAGA, where we go one, we go all. Like, this is one of these QB morons. Let's move on. I don't have to mock that. Obsessed with a dead man's wife, you are a creep. The person's saying that to me, and they know it's not true, right? They know that shit's not true. I think I better go turn off the spaghetti sauce. I think I left the spaghetti sauce on. I did not. So at least when I finish this comment, I got to go outside and feed the chickens something. They're all stuck outside. But so this person saying this, they know it's not true. They probably know it's not true, right? That I obviously am not obsessed with Erika Kirk. She is one of the hardest subjects I have ever had to cover here. Probably Hilaria Baldwin. Hilaria Baldwin's funnier. And she's not, you don't have to listen to Hilaria Baldwin for 20 minutes. I mean, that's the first speech I listened from the beginning to the end. And she says a lot of fucked up shit, Erika Kirk. Like there's that stuff where she told her daughter that, daddy's up on a work project with Jesus and he has to go make a bunch of money for your blueberry fucking habit. Like weird shit like that, right? But it's not funny from the standpoint of the way she delivers it. She's really icky. It's grating. It's hard to, like I said, there's, it's not like exact same person, but she has some similarities to my ex and the victim consciousness. It's just hard for me to watch, right? But the reason I'm talking about this person is people say shit like this, they know it's not true, but they want you to, it's like calling you an anti-Semite or, trying to label you as a bad person. And they think they can intimidate you. No one likes to have a label that doesn't fit, right? People don't even like the labels that do fit them, right? And people get defensive when they're accused of something they're not doing. And also it's a way of censoring you and getting you to, oh, well, I'm not going to be labeled as obsessed with this fucking widow, right? So I'm not going to make videos about her anymore. It's like they're trying to stop you to make videos or do whatever. And it's totally lame and weak, right? You're so jealous, saying shit like that. I'm going to unsubscribe, but, it's a little bit different, but it's the same, basic principle. They're trying to censor you, and I'm immune to that bullshit. I don't care what you think. I don't care what we say, right? It doesn't matter to me. It's obvious by the rest of these comments that I'm going to read here that people agree with me that she's a piece of shit, she sucks, and she's faking it, and she's an actress, and she's performative, and she's, a bad actress. She's not even good at it. Because, the majority of people and Christians, and many of them are TPSU people, agree with that. So this person wrote in capital letters, Erika Kirk acts more like a Jezebel, not like some woman who's lost the love of her life. She acts like it's a party time. She's out to get J.D. Vance. I will not vote for him. And then below, God is too busy for us because Charlie's trying to boss her around. And I'm not sure I understand that. God is too busy for us because Charlie is trying to boss her around. I don't know. Why does it look like the background people are AI? They put all these actors up front, and what a miserable looking bunch. An AI audience behind them. This was at the Fox News Awards. And wow, her Joker mouth creeps me out. She's lying, deceptive creep. The mermaid dress is ridiculous. she's been primed for the 2028 backup candidate watch, as she's just a shill. No, like, nobody likes her. I mean, the Republicans don't like her. You know, she's in Hillary land and she's in Kamala land, where the people who, like the Democrats, didn't like Hillary or Kamala, and most of the Republicans don't like her. Another person wrote this: I recently received the same letter from Erika Kirk. Makes me wonder how the organization captured my info, and going deeper, was the assassination part of the all psychos, was part of all these psychos, the Palantirs, etc., of the world, who are further infiltrating our privacy and private data. I think the Republican Party, if you ever given money to them or you've ever signed up for anything for them, and you're on anybody's list, or Trump or any of those people, they gave that information out to Erika. I mean, that's like, that's part of the, probably the deal that she cut for herself. Like I said, they had to capture her before they did Charlie, because if you leave the grieving widow out on her own, they had to make sure that she was bought and paid for. Turning Point donors were losing their grip on Charlie Kirk, so they separated him from Turning Point permanently, but they had no one ready to take the helm. Erika? No. Breland? No. Bryland? No. Vance? Now the entire group is falling apart. Anyone want Mikey in charge? Nope. Not that turncoat, no matter what Pastor Rob says. So, these people are all looking for a place to say these things. This was not easy to watch. I really saw it, that shield. She looked like she was walking on the red carpet. The woman really needs a stylist to show her how to dress, because that green glittery dress gown she had on, what? So out of place. Every time I saw her with one of those so-called outfits on, they are such a bad taste. She needs a stylist quick. Okay, the hologram of Charlie in the beginning is gaslighting that Charlie is still alive, peeps. These are just like all these people who are Republicans that showed up on my channel. And I'm only sharing like about 10% of those comments. You can go through them. And I didn't get to all of them. And the majority of them, like some people were upset that I said the Bible wasn't the Word of God, and some other things that they didn't like about my video. But only a few people, there's maybe 2 or 3 comments that were upset that I was ragging on Erika, because nobody likes her. Like, she's unlikable. And, it's going to get worse. I'm 80 years old and never seen a widow so happy. She just came out and said hello and now again pretending to cry. She's wearing a shiny elmo dress because she's the belle of the ball now. These are all comments that are in a row. There's so many of them. She was supposedly attended a Jesuit school. Who is at home raising your children now? These are 3 different comments. I'm on board with the guy and the phony crap from this woman and many Republicans running the show, but I feel sadness for him, as it's clear he doesn't know God's grace, though our Savior, and I'm sorry for that. Thanks, bro. I do know God's grace, but, whatever. No hate. I'm genuinely curious. God doesn't have a mind, yet he uses people and things and situations for this plan. So how is there no mind thought behind that? I'm genuinely asking. I'm going to answer that. I'm going to take my dogs out, and then I'll come back. And my voice is starting to go, so I need to give it a break. Okay, so I fed the chickens, and I went for a walk around the snow with my dogs. It got warm enough. The sun came out that the paths are clear, but there's still snow on the ground. I do some of my best sort of, I don't want to call it channeling, but, processing and connecting to God and having these answers come to me. So I have a good answer here for all this. I'm going to break it up into 3 sections. I'm going to start off with a different understanding of the creation story. And then I'm going to talk about the evolution of the worship of God and through the, modern history. And to start off with, though, I'm going to talk about channeling. So, being a conduit of God is one of the perks and the jobs when you do the Sajmark meditation. Like I volunteer to be a conduit for God's energy and God's, whatever comes through me during these videos. And so really it's about how sincere you are as a person and how clean you are and how much you have minimized your ego, which gives you the percentage of what's God and what's you. Like if God is passing through you and you're channeling God or you're being a conduit for God's energy and wisdom or whatever it might be, it's really about, how good of a conduit are you? How pure of a vessel, how pure is the divinity that comes through you, right? So when Moses went to the mountain and saw the burning bush, was it Moses that saw the burning bush? Like, how do we know that's true? Why is God coming through a burning bush? Why can't God just talk to him directly? Like, God is inside of you, right? I mean, you have a soul, and God can connect with people, and people have the ability to channel the divinity, and that's even demonstrated, especially in the New Testament. The New Testament, a lot of it was written, certainly the books of St. Paul were written after Jesus died. And so there was certainly channeling involved with that, and then some of the other teachings by the disciples. A good portion of the book is channeling. All of the New Testament is, words of Jesus interpreted through other people's lens, which is another thing, right? How good were the disciples at interpreting what Jesus was saying? How much of themselves did they put into it? And then when it was edited, how much did the editor change things, right? And so when Moses saw the burning bush and supposedly God talked to him, how do we know that's true? Just because it's in the Bible, and the fucking Bible's weird, especially the Old Testament is weird, and it's who's the authority to say that Moses talked to him? And if Moses did talk to him, right? Because anybody can say, hey, I talked to God, and God said to give me all your money, right? David Koresh went to his people, and David Koresh certainly had some abilities. He read the Bible and understood it. He had good abilities to interpret the Bible, but he's also a weird, sick fuck. And so he went to all his people and said, God has told me that I'm the only one who gets to sleep with the women, and I have to impregnate all of them. And he started to bang all the girls there. Many of them were married to other dudes. And some of the people left because they were like, well, we don't believe that shit, right? The same thing with the Bible and any of these books. Like, how do you know the person's telling the truth? And if they are telling the truth, how do you know it's God that they're talking to? Or how do you know it's God in his purest form? So since I've been doing spiritual work and being a spiritual person, I can say when I'm most sure it's God that's, communicating with me is when God is telling me to do something I don't really want to do. For example, when I, knew that I had to make this YouTube channel economically viable to get the message out that God wanted me to deliver here, to talk about the things that God wanted me to talk about, I had to cover celebrity videos. I've talked about this story quite a bit. I'm not going to go through the whole story because of my, my voice here. But I didn't want to cover celebrities. I thought it was beneath me. But I did it because I needed to do that to bring in people and meet people where they were. And still I have to do that. Like talking about Erika, Kirk, these things. A lot of this stuff I still kind of consider beneath me. I get some joy out of it. I look forward to making the videos. It's not like I'm miserable about it, but it's something that it's of a lower vibration, right? But the times where God is telling me, my heart is telling me I have to do something that I don't really want to do, or I totally don't want to do, and I do it, and I can see that there was a divine reason, a divine plan behind it later on. Those are the times I know for sure it's pure God, right? It's, or the essence of God is coming through. Whereas sometimes with things with your ego, becomes more of a part of it than God, right? And so you always have to monitor that, like what's your ego, what's God. Every spiritual person has to do that, right? And so it's inherent to understand the people who are the deepest connected to God and who have minimized their ego to such an extent that God can talk through them purely. And so the second master of the Sagemark system was a spiritual phenom who was a master level channeler and went through all these spiritual points. And he came up with what I consider a much more accurate story of creation than we've ever heard. And what he said was that originally there was this thing called the Kshob, which means the primary stir, where there was the nothingness, which was the feminine, there was nothing. And then there was this catalyst that was, a thought without a mind. It was the thought of let it be. And these two things came together. The thought was the seed. The nothingness was the egg. And from there, the universe was created. And unlike the Big Bang, because the Big Bang excludes the etheric universes, right? The Big Bang theory is not accurate. It's a goofy scientific theory, right? It has no real merit, just like, Darwin. There's some things that Darwin, there is evolution, but Darwinism isn't true. It's partially true, but not, in this way. But the creation that happened was God does things subtly. And so from this mere thought and this, the seed and the egg of divinity coming together to create the universe and the etheric universe, God was in the center, right? God was in the center. One of the cool teachings of the Sajmark system is, God is a circle with his center everywhere and his circumference nowhere, which is a beautiful way of putting it, right? Because wherever you go in the center is God. And I'll talk more about that in a second. And so at the center was God, and in the periphery, when you were close to the center, you were more subtle, because God is subtle. God is the essence of love, and love is the most subtle thing. Like you have the, like on a subatomic level or atomic level, you have the weak force and the strong force, right? And the center of every atom is divinity. So you penetrate to the center of anything, a person, a place, a thing, a rock, is divinity. And the farther the external part of the person, like the, rock is grosser than a human being, and the human being is more subtle than, a predatory animal or something like this, right? And as you move closer and closer back to the center, you become more and more subtle. Eventually, your body, it's on a soul level more than your physical body and things like this, right? But you have, at the center, you have subtle, God's love at the center, the original thought that created the universe, and the grosser levels of creation as you move farther and farther away from the divinity within you or the divinity within everything. You become grosser and grosser. So you have gross people, subtle people, these types of things. The more, the more solidified a person's ego is, the more, that they're away from God's will, the more that they're running away from the divinity within them, the grosser they become, these types of things. So this is the creation story in terms of the Sajmark system. There was this Geshob, this initial thought that created the universe, and there was, layers and layers of subtly moving towards grosser and grosser levels of creation. And we all have to go back through the periphery and achieve some sort of connection to the center, right? And we do that by loving God. We do that by loving the abstract essence of God's love. And so it's very hard for a human being to love a abstract idea, right? And so it's easier for people to love a human being. So this is the guru culture, the master culture, where there's a master, there's a guru, there's somebody, Jesus in the case of Christians, Krishna in the case of these people, who get to be around, people who got to be around Jesus or around Krishna or any of these saints, and they feel the essence of love, God pervading through this person, and they fall in love with the divinity within them, and then they're able to achieve a high level of divinity through that process, right? And so that's why the guru culture is so important, because people have a hard time loving God in God's purest form. And so loving a human being that is a person at the highest levels of spiritual attainment is the best possible thing for most people. So that's, that's the higher level of spiritual practice. But on a lower level, we talk about primitive people. We talk about brutes and barbarians and people who, really didn't have the capacity for abstract thought. They didn't have the capacity to love. They didn't have the capacity to think about God in its purest form. They were incapable of loving other people. And they worshiped power and physicality and dominance, and kings and, people who kicked ass, warriors. And so they were presented God as a powerful being. And they had to be told that they should fear God. right? So that's where you get the Old Testament and these other books that talk about God as, an angry fucking king who's going to kick the shit out of you if you displease him. And so that's why the Old Testament is for remedial-based people. And there's lots of religions and spiritual practices. And what they would do is they would create these idols, and higher developed souls would incarnate as saints on the planet, and they would charge the idols with divine energy. Sort of like the transmission that we're given in Saj Marg, which is a pure form of this. And these idols would have this subtle divine love in it, God energy, and the people would worship these idols that showed, big arms and strong fucking warriors with swords, and they bow before these idols. And they, didn't necessarily love the idols, but they would feel the energy, and they would start to become more subtle. They would start to be affected by the charge in the idols. And so this was the second phase of worship, the early stages. And so this was where you feared God. These were people who were incapable of loving God. They were brutes, they were sociopaths, they were narcissists, just animalistic people. And the best they could do was fear God. Have this idea that God was going to punish you if you were, violent, these things. They were trying to get people to behave because, this idea of an afterlife and these things. And then these idols that they worship, and they were supposed to, this was a low level of understanding divinity and fear of God and fear of, worshiping these warriors and praying to them for things, like an emperor worshiping these idols and praying God for this thing or that thing. God's going to give you this. God's going to give you more people, more power, these things. People praying for, food and safety and things. They're miserable and they're broken and they're being, beaten and raped and stolen from. And so they're, praying to God for safety and, just animalistic life, right? And so they were incapable of loving the abstract essence of God. They were incapable of understanding a being that didn't have a mind or a physical body, that had no physical attributes. They couldn't understand love in it because, God's love, because they couldn't experience love they didn't love their families. They didn't have love, and like the way a dog loves, like these things, bare basic animalistic affection and emotion, but not deeper feelings of love, not, development of the heart region and the heart level of existence. And so these were the kinds of worship that brought you the Old Testament and these other books. And people would think about God as a king because that's what, was the highest that they could think of. That's the highest thing they could think of was a king. Of course, that's kings are pieces of shit, but they're, that's the best that they could do. All right. I went and ate dinner. It's kind of late now. I want to complete this before I forget. But you can see this in your own schooling, right? When you're a kid, you have certain levels of comprehension. And you have certain levels of innocence. It takes you a while before you can understand things. And then your brain develops and your consciousness develops and your experience. And also, you have these samskaric patterns, which is another part of the Sajmark teaching. This is ancient yogic teachings about how you have these, samskaras can be something like an addiction, or they could be something like a gift, like a talent, or they can be, past life experience of being a parent. And then as you start to develop, then these things come forward. Your inner ability to be a parent, right? Your experience with it in previous lives, but also just the biological aspects of it and the knowledge that kicks in, right? We recently had a chicken that became a broody mama. She went broody, and we put some chicks under her. She did a great job. Like, some of them do, some of them don't. It's just like that. But this stuff kicks in, right? And then your consciousness changes when you're a parent, when you get a job, when you go through schooling, when you have a near-death experience. Like, these things affect you. And there are circumstances that will pull things out of you that you didn't know existed. And so, you have a different level of comprehension as you get older, especially if you're developing, you have given up on life and just, become some kind of like an automaton because you just like broken or whatever. And, whatever the things that you've gone through. But if you're developing as a person, your consciousness changes. And it's the same for people in their spiritual abilities, like their level of comprehension about what God is. Comprehension also means experience. So up to that stage, you had people that could only think about being scared of God, right? God-fearing people. Well, God-fearing people are limited because, fear isn't as motivational a force. It's motivational, just like anger is and hatred are all motivational things. But the strongest motivation is love. What people do for love goes beyond anything they'll do for fear or anger or hatred. And the love that they have for God will motivate them. And when you love something, you want to be closer to it. It pulls you towards it. But what does fear do? It pushes away. So you want to run away from God. Like if you're scared of God, then you don't want to go to God. It's one of the brilliant things that Master Charji, who was St. Paul in a previous life, said. He's the third master of the Sajmark system, said that Christians are scared of God. That's why they have to go to the son. It's like you don't want to go to the boss. You go to the boss's son because you're scared of talking to the boss. And a lot of that comes from the Old Testament, and that, the Judeo-Christian religion, which is based in fear of God. The Old Testament and the Jewish Bible is based in fear of God. These people are scared of God, right? They're worried about meeting God because God, you're born a sinner and that's all you'll ever be. You wouldn't want to go to God as a sinner, right? You're a criminal. You're a piece of shit. You're a horrible fuck. Why would you ever go before God when you're such a piece of shit? We're going to show up at God's house. God doesn't want you there. Like, no one wants you there. You sinner, right? Get the fuck out of here, you sinner. And so that attitude of what you are, that's another piece to it. Like, what are you? What God is, and what is your relation with God? Oh, I'm scared of God. Well, that sucks. And what are you? Well, I'm a sinner. Okay, so that you're pretty much fucked coming and going, right? And so these are like important, understanding of how you approach God and how you think about yourself. And if you think of yourself as a potential, that you make mistakes and you have an ego and you are a potential demon, but you also are a potential divine being, you're a potential saint, you're a potential person who could serve God, right, as a spiritual person. So you have that both potentials inside of you. And so you have to resist the one side and promote the other, right? Or minimize the one and embrace the other. And so I keep on saying this, the Old Testament and the New Testament should not be the same thing. Jesus left the fear of God behind. That's why the New Testament is so much different than the Old Testament, because Jesus no longer feared God. Jesus looked at God as a father, a compassionate, loving being. Again, still not an abstract idea of God, a God sitting on a throne. It was still remedial, like it wasn't, Jesus was still not, understanding to the full extent of what God is, but he was talking about a loving God. That's why the Old Testament and the New Testament are completely different orientations towards God. As a Christian, you can love God, and the people around Jesus would love him, right? They would, the ones the disciples who saw him as somebody who was the embodiment of a divine being. When you meet a spiritual master, when you meet a soul that has evolved, and again, it has to be when they're alive, because when they're dead, you don't get the human element. Like, it's easier to love God in human form. And my time around Master Charji and some of these other people that were in the mission, who really were incredible spiritual people and just radiated God's love. And when you can see this in your own life, if you've had people you've loved who are bad people, friends and relatives and spouses, whatever it is, and there's people in your life that are good people that you've loved, you can see how the good people, the spiritual people, will elevate you and bring you up to a higher level and encourage the good behaviors inside of you. And the bad people will encourage the negative side and the negative behaviors, right? So this is the next stage after fear of God and idol worship and, all these various things, is God in human form. And so that's where you have an experience of someone who has divinity in them, and then you love that person, and it helps to elevate you a higher level. This also happens with your pets, right? Like, animals that live with human beings are elevated on a conscious level through service, and for like animals like dogs who are very, I want to say loving, but they're on the cusp of loving, right? And so dogs are connected to their masters, and it helps them elevate to a higher level. and maybe be born as a human in a future existence, maybe their next existence, right? And so then there's the next stage, which is the Sajmarg meditation that I do, where there is a living spiritual master, someone who has mastered themselves and is merged into the source at the highest level, and they're able to transmit back from their spiritual condition and also clean people's internal worlds and not be worshipped or not be, on a pedestal looked at as a king or something, but they're somebody that you are working to be like. You're following their footsteps. You're doing the same things that they did. They're an example. They're a coach. They're a teacher. They're a Sherpa, climbing the mountain and tying you to the mountain, guiding you up the mountain, this kind of thing, right? And so this is the next stage where you're not worshiping a person. That person isn't the only son of God, and you could never achieve this, but they're showing you an example of what you can also achieve and working to help pull that divine being from within you, right? So this is like the stage of the Sajmarg meditation that I do. And the next stages after that are, when you're no longer in a physical body. Like there's a level that you can achieve through the Sajmarg meditation that brings out the highest possible level that you can achieve while here on planet Earth as your soul's, imprisoned in a physical body. And then there's levels of spiritual attainment after that as you become more and more subtle. You become more and more like God, and you are returning, more and more to the source, right? So there's these various, levels and understanding and experiences you can have of God based in your level of subtlety, right? And as long as you're in a physical body, there's only so much subtlety there can be there, even if you're a completely divine being and you're somebody who has maximized your spiritual potential. So the answer to the question, this person, about what does it mean to have a God with no mind? Well, God doesn't think, and God can't have an ego, and God is in everything. God can't separate himself and from everybody and everything. So there's no sense of, a person making decisions, right? If you're self-interested, if God was somebody thinking about himself like is presented in the Old Testament, someone who could be jealous, somebody who can be, I want to be first in line, and I want to be worshipped, I want to be this. This is the way the God's presented in the Old Testament, which makes the book fucking sucky. If you don't worship me, I'm going to punish you. This kind of bullshit that we saw in some of the things I read. And so none of that can exist in a true God, right? God cannot think that way. God can't be, have an agenda. God can't do any of those things. So you need various souls on various levels, right? You need souls that work with, animals, and souls that work with, to pull animals up to a higher level. And, people can do that and still, that could also be somebody who's a spiritual master who also interacts with animals, right? But you're pulling everything up to your level of existence. Like when a great athlete, a great football player, or basketball player or something, when they play on a team, they elevate the other people, not just on their team, but on the other team. You see this throughout any field of activity. And so, higher developed people are supposed to help people who are below them on the, evolutionary, spiritual, evolutionary path to rise up to a higher level. And so this is, something that's lost, and people don't seek it out. Like people always looking at people below them, looking down on people, looking at people who are suckier to make themselves feel better, but instead of concentrating on, people who are, like when you're trying to be better at something, if you, even in a competitive sense, if you are, looking at somebody and wanting to outdo them and transcend them, if you're looking up instead of looking down, you can go, play against toddlers and win every time, or you can play against people who are better than you on a competitive level, and they help you raise your game to a higher level. And so even if it's something where it's done in a competitive type situation, always looking up and always looking for some self-improvement, and whatever way that you get that done, whatever way that you motivate yourself to do that is important. All right, it's getting late here. I got to kind of wrap this up, but I think I've covered all of the various points of it. It's a very interesting thing that people don't know or think about, but it's one is your experience of God, and that's more important than any books and teachings and any. You can't know God mentally. So it's about experience more than anything else. But in terms of your ability to conceive of God, like how could you think about God? And some people, they don't have, they got to have some lower level idea of God because that's all that they can conceive of. And that's why there's religions and there's some of these things that are out there for people very primitive, because those people themselves don't have the ability for abstract thought. And people in the past, and these people, uneducated people who are, when you get into the masses. But there's always these higher threads, these higher sects of people, SECTS, these different, like in the Muslim tradition, they have the Sufis, and in Judaism, they have Kabbalism, right? And you have these various things. In the Hindu tradition, they have these various forms of yoga and things that you can do. Not the Hatha yoga, which is poses, but yoga that's about union with God. And the spiritual, where the mystics go and the spiritual people go. And that's what I present information here for people who are, potentially spiritual people that can have a internal relationship with God and can, grow in their understanding of divinity and the nature of God, right? And so, yeah, there it is. Okay, I got to wrap this up. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Baramano, definitely pointing to the apocalypse. And the ascension, everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.